Self-help, relationship help, business help, and sometimes just no damn help at all. But we're always here to have fun. They call me the game changer and the real deal, but I'm not a cliche. Just call me Kazy. What's your name, little girl? What's your name? Okay, we're going to cut that out, and Spencer's going to sing it over because she's way better than me. So, here's the question today. Can your name make you successful, or can it hold you back from being successful? So today we're going to talk about that. And I have my producer with us, Stacey Maynard. Say hi, Stacey.
Hey.
Hey. So it's an interesting concept, right? Does it make a difference in your life, in your business, in your relationships? And I was starting to think about it. And I thought, let's go back in time, back to the time travel. And, my name's Fay, and I got that name. My parents named me because I was born in the era of Bonnie and Clyde, and the star of that movie was Faye Dunaway. So it wasn't this really exciting story about how they got my name. That was it. How about you, Stacey? How'd you get your name?
Well, funny. I wish I had the family history and all of the really cool ways that people get their names, but my mom was in the hospital and she was watching the soap opera The Guiding Light. And there was a Stacey on there, and she said she was really nice character. So, hey, see? That's where my name came from.
See, so we're both born with names off of basically TV or movie characters. Yay.
So no family history, sorry.
So my name, my parents are actually Greek, and so I have a Greek name. It's Vasiliki. And that one I never used, obviously, because I could barely pronounce it, let alone everyone I knew. But I really never liked my name. Never liked Faye. And the reason I never liked it was because I thought it sounded very old. I didn't know any Fays. The only Faye I'd ever heard of was in their 80s. Didn't like it. And to complicate things, I don't have a middle name. So I didn't have an alternative. I didn't have a go-to. Do you have a middle name?
I do.
Well, uh-oh.
That's family, though, because I have the same middle name as my mom, and it's Louise.
Okay. So
yeah.
Louise. So that's okay. You can use that. If you didn't like your first name, you'd have a second name to. So I always swore that when I had a girl or a boy, whenever I had kids, I would give them a middle name. So if they didn't like their first name, they could use it. So no middle name, didn't really like my first name. And then my last name my maiden name is Kazy. Does that sound Greek to you?
No.
No. And it's kind of hard to pronounce, right? Like it doesn't roll off your tongue. I mean, it's not as bad as if it was like blah, 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 populous. But again, there was no connotation. So I really, I didn't have an affinity to any of my name. And not that it's a bad name or anything. It's just I didn't have an affinity to it. What about you? What was your maiden name?
My maiden name was MacDougall.
MacDougall.
Mm-hmm.
Stacey
Very
MacDougall.
Scottish.
Stacey. So here's an interesting thing. When you say Stacey MacDougall, did you see how you changed? Your whole persona changed. You guys can't see it there in Radioland, but her shoulders went back, and it was like, it was almost regal, right?
Well, it's a proud, lots of family history, a big story behind it. Yeah, but I didn't want to hyphenate because that would just be painful to everybody.
Absolutely. And now, I mean, looking back now at this age where I am, I would tell my daughter, you don't need to take somebody's name. You have a name, right?
Yeah.
So I didn't really understand that concept back then. But interesting how your persona changed when you said that name, right? So let's bank that and come back to that in a minute. So again, it's Faye, it's old, I don't like it. Kazy is kind of hard and weird to pronounce, and people didn't really get it. So it was always awkward when I said it, and people would always go, what nationality is that? Because they never understood it. And then I got married, and my married name is Chapple. You can't get much more English and waspy than that, right? And it's an easy name to pronounce, and everyone understood it and easy to say. And remarkably, I looked back at the experience and I realized that, to be honest, when I used that name, things were different. I got more interviews. I got more people being comfortable with the name. They never asked how to pronounce it. It was kind of fascinating to me, and I never really understood it until I looked back. So I was sitting there thinking, am I comfortable with it? I am comfortable. Why am I comfortable with Fay Chapple? Because it's easy, and I know I'm not going to get questioned. So does that make it different on how you're perceived?
Well, I think people understand easy.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as it becomes complicated, so funny, I always joke with my husband that I married him because his last name started with the same initial as my maiden name, so my initials didn't change. And it was easy to say, and I didn't have to spell it.
There you go.
Because no matter how easy you think MacDougall is it capital D? Is it not? Is there, what vowels are in there?
Yeah.
Is it MC, MAC? And it became complicated.
Yeah.
So when I met him, I'm like, your name's easy. And that was really the main reason why I changed it.
And why you married him.
Yeah, I tell him that too.
But it's interesting.
Someone.
They did a study and it said that people have a tendency to end up in relationships with people that have the same sounding names.
Really?
Yeah, same. And they also say that you have a tendency of picking companies to work at that have your initials in them. So I can't really talk about that now because my company is my name. But anyway, so I'm looking back and I'm like, okay, so who am I then? Where do I feel comfortable? What do I feel good about saying in my name? Because I wasn't comfortable with the first one. The second one's okay. It's not really my name. Fay Chapple. Chapel is inherited, even though I've lived with it longer now than my maiden name. But, what am I comfortable with? I'm comfortable with all of them, but what do I feel like is what the question was. And I have a friend that calls me a million different names, and you know him, and he calls everybody a million different nicknames. And when he was laughing one day about when my mom was telling him a story about me and when I was little and eating cheesecake every day, and he used to start talking about saying, "Oh, little baby Kazy eating cheesecake," and I was like, "Hang on," and then "What are you calling me?" And he's like, "I'm calling you Kazy. You look like a Kazy," and I just sort of went, I kind of like that name. It felt right. It was my old maiden name, kind of with a twist. And I was just like, that feels good. There's no definition around it, right? There was no precursor. It didn't belong to anyone. It didn't belong to really my first life, my last life, my business. So really, I could say anything I want as Kazy. I could be a business coach or a yoga teacher or an actress. I could talk about anything I wanted, and I didn't feel like I had a history. And so that's why I named the show Call Me Kazy.
Well, it's interesting that you chose a name that you didn't necessarily have a history with, because I know some people do change their names because maybe they have a negative connotation or a negative relationship with their name, and the people who are positive and know this is who I am, this is my identity, my name is my identity, they don't change. So it's an interesting, you really have to want, I don't know, it's an interesting relationship you have with your name.
Well, it is because, you get the same kind of thing, I guess, all the time. Like I'm sure that when somebody meets you, do they sing you the song? Stacy's mom has got it, right?
I do get that a lot.
Right?
More than I would like.
So
my mom loves it, by the way.
Exactly. So, I mean, the truth is that there is something to be said about your name. So, we talked about in the first part of this segment, which was, right, can it make you successful? I think it can, but not because of what you think. Number one is you got to be comfortable with it, right? The more you're comfortable with your name, the easier it is. So Fay Chapple is a really easy name on stage. It's a really easy name in business. And when I say it, I feel kind of powerful, right? I feel like it's a strong name, Fay Chapple, right? And shake your hand, get on stage, introducing.
And just for people who can't see, she's actually reaching her hand out, which I think is really funny when people do that on radio.
I told you we would tell it like it is here, right? But it's true. So again, it was a comfortable name to me. It made sense. So I started doing a lot of research for this segment because I was interested now in what makes it different. And there's a lot of studies from the New York universities, et cetera, and they came up with a few common things. And number one is we kind of talked about in the start, which was if your name is easy to pronounce, people will favor you more because it's easy, and people like easy, right? So that it very straightforward. Common names are more likely to be hired and to be liked because it's easy. So essentially what it comes down to is people are lazy. And they, right? Am I wrong? People are lazy. They want easy.
It's true.
Right? So when they're comfortable And it's a subliminal thing. They're not trying to discount somebody with a exotic long name, but they're like, oh, Joe? Okay, let's hire Joe because I understand the name. So that was really interesting to me. And then the other piece of the study was like people who use their middle initial appear smarter.
Really?
So if it was Stacy L. Maynard, all of a sudden you're a prof. Right? Think about it. What was the guy on that show Keating? What was
Michael J. Fox.
Yeah, what was his name in the show? He used a middle initial, remember?
He did, yeah. Family Ties.
Yeah.
I can't remember his name.
It'll come to us and then we're going to blurt it out at the end of the segment. But the truth is, I think the study was right. When you use your middle initial, somehow you appear smarter. So does that help you with success? Absolutely it does, right? And, for people like me who have no middle name, I guess we could make up a little middle name, right? I could just use an initial. So interestingly enough.
Oh, Alex P. Keaton.
There it is, right?
Yeah.
So Alex Keaton. So think about it. Alex Keaton and Alex P. Keaton. Doesn't he sound smarter with the initial? He does.
See, my brother used his initial, but that was because he hated his middle name. So his middle name became W, and that was his name, and he always used his initial with every single thing. And I always thought it was really, so I did the opposite. So it's interesting. I didn't really think about that point.
Yeah. So kind of interesting, the study was fascinating, and it was done not too long ago, and there's been studies since, and there's all these new kind of interesting pieces. Like, for example, noble names get more managerial positions. So if you're like king and you're, they just, it I don't know, connotates, I guess, some type of leadership, I guess. Elizabeth, like the queen,
Right.
They all of a sudden those managerial positions seem to fall into the laps of somebody with those noble names. And I guess back in the day, that's what it was because everyone had the same name. We won't talk about the inbreeding.
Different show.
Different show. I don't mean to do that here. And then the other piece, which I love, is that women with gender neutral names have more success in law, engineering, technology, etc. So those of you who don't know, my daughter's name is Spencer. And so I actually named her Spencer Paige Chapple. And the reason I gave her a middle name that I believed, even though it is gender neutral, Paige is really more female now. And I gave her a middle name that I liked because I wanted to make sure if she didn't like her first name, because it's a tough one to carry if you're gender neutral name, right? It wasn't in vogue at the time when I named it, but I loved the name. I just thought it sounded great. And and I will fess up to her middle name, Paige. Did anyone here watch Knots Landing in the day?
Oh, Knots Landing. I remember that show.
Do you remember Paige?
No.
Paige. Nicolette Sheridan played a character called Paige, and that's where I got that name from. So, and then anyone asked me, where'd you get Spencer? Is it a family name? Because, again, does it sound a little noble and all this stuff? I'm like, not so much. Do you remember Jacqueline Smith, one of the Charlie's Angels girls?
Right.
She had a daughter, and her name was Spencer Margaret. And I loved the name, and I was really young, I think, when I heard it. And I when I got married, I told my husband that I didn't care any of the other names, but the girl, that's her name. Spencer's her name.
So I'm glad that we've continued the tradition of naming people after TV characters.
They're the only people I let on my podcast.
That's a great rule.
So if you haven't been named after a TV character, you're not allowed on. So let's go back to the study. Men with short names are overrepresented in the C-suite. So most CEOs have names like Bill, Tom, Joe, John. Interesting, right?
Really interesting.
And if they are a CEO and say their name is an extended version, they will shorten their name because it sounds more friendly. So interesting, though. Now I look back at all the presidents I worked for in the past, and yeah, they all had short names. What about you? Now you're going to tell me Vladimir or something.
No. One of the boss he was Jerry. And he never even used his last name because no one ever had a name like him. It's just Jerry.
There you go. Short, easy.
Simple.
Yep. Easy to pronounce. And what was interesting is, so it's very short. The polar opposite is for women. So women CEOs carry their full name. So it's Catherine, not Kathy.
Right, because maybe Kathy would be too casual.
Right.
Okay.
Is that interesting?
Mm-hmm.
Like I couldn't believe it when I heard it at first, because it was like, it actually, when you think about it, all those statements were correct. So is there a difference when you name your child something? Are they able to be more successful? I think the answer is yes, right? But not for the reasons you think. It's not because people want this name. It's just that it's easy to pronounce, easy to remember. There's, even if you know a Joe, you probably know 10 Joes. And if you didn't like one, there's probably one you liked.
Exactly.
So there was another study from a prof at UCLA, and he said the highest rated names for girls in terms of success, interesting, I'm going to read you the list, guys: Jacqueline, Elizabeth, Catherine, Victoria, Susan. They're all, again, long extended names, very regal or noble in sounding, right? And for boys, Stephen, Ross, Christopher, James, Robert, David, Kenneth, Thomas. Again, all the same connotations that we thought. So it's interesting to think about the fact that it's all because we're lazy. So success based on your name is because everybody else in the world is lazy.
But I find it interesting that you're saying the difference between women elongating their names and taking, because it's a little bit more traditional,
right?
But yet men, somebody like Thomas, would shorten it to Tom.
Tom, yeah.
Even David, that was my dad. He was Dave. So it's like that one syllable. So I wonder why.
Total opposite.
Yeah, that's interesting.
My youngest is Grayson, but I only call him Gray. Right. So I'm guilty of it too. Why didn't I just name him Gray? I don't know.
Well, I did the same thing. My son is Zachary. We call him Zach.
Right.
Why? Why not? But I guess my philosophy when I named him was I wanted him to have the option.
Right.
So if he wanted a longer name and if that suited him, or if he wanted to shorten it to make it, because you think about that. Yeah.
And so it's an interesting concept. And as we, a lot of people have named their children something a little odd, out of the norm, and thinking that they would be unique and a little different out there and be memorable. But in fact, the opposite is correct, because it's true. Have you ever met somebody that you didn't pronounce their name and then you're really uncomfortable when you had to talk to them again because you never could say their name? You're afraid to say their name, right? And that's the other piece of the study. So, our brain wants the ease, right? It wants the ease of the familiarity that says to it, we can trust this person because it's at ease. And then the minute the information is difficult to process, our brain says danger, right? So we're not going there because we're like, I can't really say their name. And I've been in that situation. Have you?
Well, it was interesting. I was having a conversation with a girl yesterday, and she's pregnant. So she's thinking about the names, and it's a girl, and she is determined to name the girl starting with the letter Q. Because that's just some sort of family dynamic that makes sense for them. Didn't ask why. And so she's trying to find something unique, and she's trying to figure out whether she just takes a name that starts with a K and just puts a Q there, but she doesn't want QU. And so she's kind of trying to finagle, almost spell a word that doesn't even exist.
Right.
And
that's a tough one.
It is a tough one. And I said to her, just be prepared. Number one, it's not going to be easy. Number two, she's going to have to spell her name for the rest of her life. And it's going to become complicated. Yeah. So you have to consider all of that when you're naming somebody.
And that's one of the interesting pieces that I read about, is the fact that, not only easy and memorable works, but in fact, think about the child. If they are constantly having to feel uncomfortable, having to spell out their name, say their name, their self-confidence is different. So you're spending your time trying to say your name, instead of being, boom, you're accepted, you're there. So there is a huge validation to understanding how difficult it could be for a child. Just like what I said of my last name, it was awkward for me because no one understood it. Not a bad name, it was just not of ease for people, right? So I think, in our daily lives, we have to make sure that we understand that, yes, simple and easy is way more memorable and much more gives you more of an opportunity to get interviews, to get on stage, to be hired as an applicant. You think about the process of sending your CV out. I mean, when somebody sees a name, they understand, oh, John Smith, why do we use that name, John Smith? Well, because it's easy, right? So keep your initials, look smarter. For women, gender neutral rocks. Shorter names are better for the C-suite, right? People marry similar named people, which is kind of interesting, and that goes for you too, right? And you've got to think of those things when you're naming your child. So yes, you want to be unique, and I'm not telling you to go throw out the names that we've heard about, like apple and peaches and all that stuff, but
fruit.
But I can't see peaches running the CEO suite, right? Like it just. It is a bias. It's not an intentional bias. It's just how we were brought up.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, so what's our big takeaway? This is what I want you to do, because every time we leave these shows, I want you to take something away. So what I want you to do is you to go back home and think about, do you like your name? And if you were called something else, would you act differently?
Well, it was interesting when I was a kid, because Stacy was a boy's name. For
right.
so long.
Yeah.
And I had one teacher that lined everybody up, and they did all the girls first, and I was still sitting there. And then they did all the boys. And all of a sudden she got to the S, and she looked at me and she goes, "Oh my goodness, you're a girl." And I'm like, yeah. But that changed my persona right there about my name, because I went, you know what? I kind of put my shoulders back and held proud and went, you know what? I do like my name.
See?
But even before that, so it was interesting, just that connotation that the teacher had, and that assumption just made me change my perspective to kind of prove that I am worthy of this name. It was kind of a weird mentality. I mean, I was really young at the time, but I remember it.
Yeah. So I think, for the listener, I want you to think about, do you like your name? Like, are you comfortable saying, are you proud in terms of how it carries behind you and behind your persona? And if you're not, and if you think it's holding you back, add your middle initial. Go to your middle name. Let me hear why exactly you aren't comfortable with your name, or you are comfortable with your name. I'd love to hear from you. So leave me some comments on my website, or get in touch with me, because it'd be really interesting to find out if you are one of those people that would completely change their success path by changing their name. Thanks for tuning in today. Go to callmekazy.com and let me know what you want me to talk about or rant about, or anything that's on your mind, and I will be sure to get to it. So don't forget to subscribe, and I'll talk to you soon.